The engine screamed over my head before I saw the plane. I dropped beside the truck as the propeller wash flattened the hay and threw dry grass into my face. The smell of fuel hit a second later, sharp, oily, wrong for a field that had belonged to my family longer than I'd been alive. A white single-engine Cessna skimmed over the fence, touched down hard, and bounced once before its tires bit into the earth less than 50 yards from where I'd been standing. The plane kept coming. I pressed my shoulder against the rear wheel and watched its left wing pass close enough to make the truck rock. Roy Haskins had called me that morning about a broken cattle fence. I'd driven out expecting loose wire, maybe a steer in the wrong pasture, not an aircraft landing on my father's land. The pilot slowed, turned at the far end of the field, then taxied toward a clean opening cut through the cedar fence bordering Cedar Ridge Estates. Beyond it stood 6 metal hangars I had never seen before. Their doors gleamed between the trees. I got up slowly, tasting dust. The pilot killed the engine near the opening. The sudden silence rang in my ears. He climbed out wearing mirrored sunglasses and a golf shirt, then lifted 2 leather bags from behind the seats. "Runway's a little soft today," he called. "You guys might want to roll it before the weekend." I stared at him. "Who's you guys?" He lowered the bags. "Maintenance. This is my field." His expression changed, but only for a second. Then he gave me the patient smile people use when they think someone else is confused. "No, this is Cedar Ridge Air Park." I walked past him without answering. Fresh tire grooves cut through the hay in parallel black lines. Small solar lights marked both sides of a long, straight corridor. A red windsock snapped above the western fence. Near my boots, a white threshold marker had been staked into the soil with professional care. None of it belonged there. I pulled out my phone and began taking pictures. The pilot followed me. "Hey, man, you can't be walking around on an active runway." I photographed the tail number. "What's your name?" I asked. "Luke Barrett." His confidence thinned. "I have permission to be here." "From who?" He unlocked his phone and opened an app, Whitmore Air Park Services. "I pay annual access." A golf cart appeared through the opening in the fence before I could ask anything else. Vanessa Whitmore drove it one-handed, her blonde hair unmoving in the wind, dark glasses covering half her face. She wore a cream jacket despite the heat. She stopped between me and the hangars. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "you're creating a safety issue." She knew my name. I lowered the phone. A plane almost hit me in my own field. "This corridor has been operating safely for years." Her voice stayed smooth. "You cannot interfere with established flight operations." She pointed toward my truck as if it were the trespasser. "Move that vehicle immediately. If a pilot is injured because of an obstruction you placed here, you may be personally liable." I looked at the cut fence, the lights, the drainage ditch running beneath the grass. This wasn't something they had set up last week. I stepped toward the boundary and saw 2 rusted metal caps lying in the weeds. Survey monuments. My father's initials were stamped into one of them. I picked it up and slipped it into the faded red toolbox behind my truck seat. Then I turned back to Luke. "Show me exactly what you bought." Vanessa's mouth tightened. Luke hesitated, then held out his phone. The digital permit carried a map of the runway, a 4-year membership history, and a line beneath the Cedar Ridge logo that made my hands go cold. Property owner authorization, Mercer family. They hadn't just been landing on my land. They had been selling it. They had been selling it. The words stayed in my head as I zoomed in on Luke's permit. For years of renewal dates. For years of payments. For years of strangers dropping out of the sky onto ground my father had trusted me to protect. Vanessa reached for the phone. "That information is proprietary." Luke pulled it back. "I paid for it." I photographed every screen before she could stop me. The route map, membership number, emergency contact, and a note directing pilots through Gate 3 behind the hangars. Then I sent the images to myself and watched Vanessa's jaw tighten. "You need to leave," she said. "The board will contact you through the proper channels. This isn't HOA property." That question was settled years ago. She climbed into the golf cart and drove off without looking back. Luke stood beside his plane, suddenly less certain about the runway he had purchased. I told him not to take off until I moved my truck and walked the full corridor for hazards. I wasn't giving permission. I was keeping someone from dying while I figured out what had been done. I paced the field with my phone, recording everything. The strip ran from the southern pasture almost to the county road. White markers sat at regular intervals. Solar lights had been sunk flush with the soil. Near the hangars, gravel disappeared beneath the grass, packed hard enough to support aircraft tires. A black drainage pipe crossed a shallow trench where Roy's cattle used to drink after storms. This had required contractors, equipment, money, and time. At the western edge, I opened the faded red toolbox. Beneath rusted wrenches and an old tape reel sat my father's field notebook, its cover soft from years of use. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just set the survey cap beside it and locked the box. By noon, I had ordered county aerial images, title records, permits, and archived property listings. I also mounted 2 trail cameras on trees well outside the marked corridor, both facing inward. The first plane arrived before I finished tightening the second strap. It came low enough that the prop wash slapped my shirt against my back. I stepped behind an oak and filmed it landing. 10 minutes later, a second aircraft followed. Then a third. The passengers weren't paramedics or firefighters. They wore loafers and carried leather folders. A real estate agent met them at the hangars with bottled water and Cedar Ridge brochures. My father had suffered his stroke 4 years earlier. After that, he stopped driving, stopped checking fences, stopped arguing with anyone who sounded official. I had trusted the land was quiet because the tax bills stayed current and Roy kept the pasture from going wild. That trust now felt like a door I had left unlocked. A certified envelope arrived by courier before sunset. The notice accused me of entering an active aviation corridor, interfering with authorized operations, and creating a dangerous obstruction with my truck. It demanded that I stop photographing residents and remove all unauthorized surveillance equipment within 24 hours. At the bottom was Vanessa's signature. Attached was a color map labeled Emergency Landing Corridor. I looked across the field as another group climbed from a plane carrying champagne and sales packets. The notice called it emergency access. Their own aircraft were bringing in buyers. I laid Vanessa's notice across the hood of my truck and photographed both sides before the evening light disappeared. Then I pulled Luke's permit up beside it on my phone. Same runway outline. Same Cedar Ridge logo. Different purpose. The notice called the strip an emergency corridor. Luke's membership called it private aviation access. The sales brochures called it an exclusive fly-in lifestyle. 3 names for the same piece of my field. I drove straight to the county administration building the next morning. The lobby smelled like floor wax and burnt coffee. A clerk named Emily Carver listened without interrupting while I placed the notice, Luke's permit, and my photographs on the counter. I need every filing connected to this runway, the hangars, and that drainage work. Her eyes paused on the map. You're the Mercer owner? I am now. She typed for several minutes, then printed a permit index. Cedar Ridge had approvals for 6 residential hangars and a gravel access lane. The applications referred repeatedly to an existing emergency aviation easement. Where's the runway permit? I asked. Emily tapped the page. There isn't one issued by the county. Then why approve hangars? Because the applicant submitted proof of legal air access. She turned her monitor toward me. A scanned document appeared beneath the permit file. My father's name sat at the bottom. The signature looked close enough to stop my breathing for half a second. I asked for a certified copy and drove to the farmhouse before calling anyone. Dust moved through the kitchen in thin bars of sunlight. I opened the red toolbox on the table and took out Dad's field notebook. His measurements filled the pages in block printing. Bearings, distances, reference trees, coordinates written twice when he wanted no argument later. I spread the county map beside them and started comparing numbers. Most matched. 2 did not. One coordinate ended in 638 on Dad's page and 683 on the easement. Another had the final digits reversed. Tiny differences on paper. On the ground, they moved the claimed boundary dozens of feet toward the center of our field. I drove back out with stakes, flagging tape, and a measuring wheel. The heat shimmered above the grass as I walked Dad's line from the surviving reference points. His original path cut straight beneath the runway lights and through the buried drainage trench. Vanessa arrived before I finished. She parked her golf cart across my measuring line. You were instructed to stop interfering. I'm checking my boundary. The boundary was established years ago. By who? She smiled. Qualified professionals. I held up the recorded easement. Melissa Grant notarized this. Her smile stayed in place, but her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Melissa worked at Vanessa's real estate office. I remembered her name from the Cedar Ridge sales brochures stacked near the hangars. Notaries confirm signatures, Vanessa said. They don't choose property lines. Was my father in her office when he signed? You'll direct further questions to counsel. That afternoon, an email from the county arrived. Cedar Ridge had filed a complaint claiming my stakes created a hazard to aircraft. A hearing request was already attached. I looked again at the easement, then at the permit dates. The first hangar approval had been issued 11 days after my father's stroke. The paperwork didn't just use his land. It had started when he could no longer defend it. By 8 the next morning, Cedar Ridge had turned that fact into a weapon against me. A process server met me at the farmhouse gate and handed me a thick envelope stamped emergency petition. Vanessa wasn't asking the county to review the boundary anymore. She was asking a judge to stop me from entering the marked corridor on my own land. The petition described me as an absentee successor whose sudden interference threatened pilots, residents, and emergency access. Attached photographs showed my truck, my stakes, and me holding Dad's notebook near the runway. Someone had been watching from the hangars. I carried every original document into the farmhouse and locked them in Dad's old gun safe. Then I scanned the field notes, survey cap photographs, permits, notices, and Luke's membership screens. I saved one copy to an encrypted drive and mailed another to Allison Reed, the property attorney I had hired that morning. Before leaving, I moved the trail camera feeds to remote storage. It felt excessive. It wasn't. At the courthouse 2 days later, Vanessa arrived with 3 HOA directors, 2 pilots, and an attorney whose leather briefcase probably cost more than my truck. She wore navy blue and carried herself like the hearing had already ended. Her lawyer called the runway a long-established emergency corridor. He showed the judge the recorded easement, county hangar approvals, and photographs of my flagged stakes. He placed unmarked obstructions inside an active flight path, he said. We are asking only that he stop creating hazards while ownership questions are resolved. Only. My insurer had called that morning. Until the aviation dispute was settled, my farm liability coverage would remain suspended. Roy couldn't cut hay. Contractors wouldn't enter the western field. Every day the planes kept landing. I carried risk I couldn't insure, and now they wanted a court order preventing me from stopping them. Allison kept her voice level. My client disputes the easement, the mapped boundary, and the commercial nature of these operations. He has removed nothing and blocked nothing. Vanessa's attorney lifted one of her certified notices. Yet he has installed surveillance equipment and approached paying users. The word paying hung in the room. Vanessa glanced at him. Allison heard it too, but she didn't chase it. Not yet. The judge studied the easement, then looked at me. Mr. Mercer, until this document is challenged through proper evidence, I cannot treat it as non-existent. He issued a temporary order prohibiting me from placing vehicles, equipment, stakes, fencing, or other obstructions inside the claimed corridor. I could inspect from outside it. I could gather records. I could challenge the easement. I could not shut down the flights. Vanessa smiled only after we stepped outside. By noon, Cedar Ridge residents were receiving an email accusing me of trying to destroy their emergency access and threatening property values. It warned that my lawsuit could force a special assessment on every household. At 3, Luke sent me a screenshot without comment. His annual fee had gone to Whitmore Air Park Services LLC, not the HOA. I asked him to preserve everything. At sunset, I checked my remote camera feed. Vanessa stood in my field beside 2 contractors. One man yanked out the fresh survey stake near Dad's original line. The other carried it toward a truck. Then Vanessa looked directly at the camera. The screen went black. An hour later, a Cedar Ridge banner appeared online. Grand Fly-In Sales Weekend. 12 aircraft confirmed. She hadn't just one temporary access. She was expanding the operation while the court had tied my hands. By Saturday morning, the western field looked like an air show. Engines droned over the farmhouse roof. Propellers chopped the hot air into pulses that rattled the kitchen windows. Cedar Ridge volunteers in matching polo shirts waved arriving pilots toward the hangars while real estate agents handed out bottled water and glossy sales folders. My land had become their showroom. I stood beyond the court-marked corridor with Allison and the independent survey crew, watching a contractor pull another white runway marker into place. The surveyor drove his rod into the soil, checked the receiver, then looked at me. "Your father's line runs through the lights," he said, "and through that drainage system." He marked the coordinate with orange paint outside the flight path. We couldn't replace the stake Vanessa's contractors had removed without risking another accusation, so he recorded everything twice: photographs, satellite readings, measurements from surviving reference trees. The completed report arrived Monday. Nearly 1,900 feet of runway crossed my parcel. The buried drainage pipe, threshold lights, and most of the graded surface were mine too. I expected that to feel like progress. Instead, my insurance carrier sent a second letter confirming the suspension. No hay cutting, no contractors, no agricultural operations near the corridor. Roy came by that afternoon and stood beside his mower trailer, hat crushed between both hands. "I can't bring my crew in uninsured, Dan. I know. I've got to take the south lease before somebody else does." That meant losing the season's income and probably Roy with it. He had worked those fields with Dad for 18 years. Watching his trailer disappear down the gravel road hurt more than the court order. Then the invoices started. Survey work, filing fees, Allison's retainer, expert review. I opened the metal cash box where I had kept the money for repairing Dad's farmhouse roof and counted it twice before writing the checks. By Friday, the roof fund was gone. Vanessa used every dollar I spent against me. Cedar Ridge residents received another email claiming my reckless litigation had forced the board to consider a $5,000 special assessment. Someone printed my photograph beneath the words "Air Park Extortion" and taped it to the gate. At the hardware store, a woman I had never met looked at my work boots and said, "You're the man trying to shut down emergency flights." I left without answering. That night, I found both rear tires on my survey truck cut through the sidewalls. The rubber sagged against the gravel. No camera covered that part of the driveway. For the first time, I wondered whether I should have blocked the field on day one and forced everyone to deal with the truth before Vanessa built a legal wall around it. Then Allison called. "The camera footage helps," she said, "but moving one stake doesn't prove the easement itself is fraudulent. We need the chain. Who changed the description, who benefited, and who knew?" So I stopped staring at the tires and went back inside. The county's archive planning videos loaded slowly on Dad's old computer. For years earlier, Vanessa stood at a podium describing the corridor as a donated emergency route for wildfire evacuation. Behind her sat Frank Dillard, then the HOA treasurer. When Vanessa said the Mercer family had approved everything, Frank looked up sharply. Not surprised. Alarmed. The next frame showed him leaning toward another board member and covering the microphone with his hand. Vanessa had won the hearing, the field, the residents, and the money. But in the moment she made her victory official, someone beside her already knew the story was false. Someone beside her already knew the story was false. I replayed the planning video frame by frame. Frank Dillard's face changed before Vanessa finished the sentence. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes moved toward the board packet in front of him, then toward the county attorney. He wasn't confused. He was watching a lie enter the public record. I pulled the meeting minutes from the county archive and compared them with the permit index Emily had printed for me. The board had approved money for temporary emergency clearing on Cedar Ridge property. Nothing about fixed-wing aircraft. Nothing about commercial memberships. Nothing about crossing the Mercer boundary. I called Frank once. He didn't answer. I left a message with no accusations. "Mr. Dillard, I'm reviewing the aviation filings from 4 years ago. Your name appears in the records. I'd like to understand what the board actually authorized." He called back after dark. His voice stayed low. Not over the phone. We met the next morning at a diner 2 towns west. Frank arrived early and chose a booth facing the door. He was in his 60s, narrow-shouldered, with nicotine stains on 2 fingers and a manila envelope resting beneath his palm. "I resigned because the numbers stopped making sense," he said. I didn't touch the envelope. "What numbers?" He slid out copies of invoices. Cedar Ridge had approved a windsock, brush removal, and a small helicopter clearing for wildfire season. Vanessa later paid contractors for grading, drainage, runway lighting, and hangar access through Whitmore Air Park Services. The drainage pipe in my field, the solar lights, Luke's payments. Separate details became one machine. Did the board approve the expansion? Frank shook his head. She called it implementation. He showed me ledgers where pilot fees were labeled safety donations. Other entries went directly to Vanessa's company as consulting and access management payments. I photographed every page, then asked Frank to keep the originals. Allison would need to verify them before we used anything. Back at the farmhouse, I opened Dad's field notebook beside the easement again. The transposed coordinates shifted the boundary toward the runway. The recorded signature resembled Dad's older tax filings, but the pen strokes were too smooth for the weeks after his stroke. I requested certified hospital records through the estate and signature samples from the county tax office. Allison obtained Melissa Grant's notary journal entry through formal discovery. The entry had a date and document title. No identification number. No witness notation. No indication Dad had appeared before her. That evening, Allison and I built a timeline across the farmhouse wall. Blue tape for county filings. Yellow for construction. Red for payments. White for my father's medical records. The first hangar permit came 11 days after his stroke. The easement appeared 3 weeks later. Commercial memberships began before the county finished inspecting the access lane. Vanessa hadn't inherited a misunderstanding. She had built each layer before anyone expected the next. I duplicated the files onto 3 drives, placed one in Allison's office, and mailed another to a secure document service. The originals went back into Dad's safe. Then I signed the preservation letters Allison had prepared. One went to the HOA, one to Whitmore Air Park Services, one to Melissa, one to every contractor named in Frank's invoices. Vanessa still had the runway, the injunction, and the neighborhood behind her. But when the certified mail receipts began printing, one after another, the fight stopped being about what I believed. It became about what they could no longer afford to destroy. The certified mail receipts were still warm when Vanessa called the emergency board meeting. Her notice arrived by email at 6:12 the next morning. Cedar Ridge would vote on permanent commercial flight authorization, expanded hangar access, and legal action to recover every dollar caused by my malicious interference. Allison read it twice. She's trying to turn disputed use into an official board decision. Can she? She can create another document. Whether it survives is different. I asked her to send the board one final offer. Suspend flights, secure the records, remove Vanessa from control of the runway files, and let an independent attorney review the easement. In exchange, I would delay the next court filing for 48 hours. The offer wasn't surrender. It was a line painted across the road. Vanessa crossed it before lunch. Her reply called my conditions extortion and confirmed the grand fly-in sales weekend would proceed as scheduled. 12 aircraft. Prospective buyers. Demonstration flights. She copied the board, the county, and several residents, as if the size of the audience made her version true. I saved the email with the preservation notices. Then I drove to the clubhouse. The meeting room smelled of lemon cleaner and overheated wiring. Nearly every chair was filled. Residents turned when I entered, their conversations dropping into a low, hostile murmur. A projector displayed photographs of my truck beneath the words "Threat to Community Access." I took a seat beside Allison and placed Dad's red notebook on the table. Vanessa noticed it immediately. She called the meeting to order and described the runway as a life-saving community asset under attack by a man seeking an unreasonable private payout. Then she asked the board to authorize continued operations and defend the easement at any cost. Allison stood. Before you vote, we are requesting confirmation that every director received Mr. Mercer's preservation notice and understands the ownership dispute remains active. Vanessa answered for them. They received it. And you intend to continue commercial flights. Emergency and community aviation access, she corrected. I opened Luke's payment receipt on my phone and held it where the front row could see. Then why does your company collect annual landing fees? The room shifted. Vanessa didn't look at the screen. My company administers access on behalf of the community. Was that arrangement approved by the full board? Her attorney leaned toward her, but she raised one hand. This board authorized me to implement the air park. Frank's old minutes were already secured in Allison's office. The actual vote mentioned brush clearing and emergency helicopter access. Nothing more. I let the silence stretch. Outside, an engine approached from the south. The windows vibrated as a plane crossed low over the roof. Vanessa smiled. You hear that? Established use. For uninterrupted years. The board voted 5-2 to continue operations, expand the sales weekend, and reject my demand for an independent review. Every director signed the resolution. My name was added beneath a paragraph accusing me of obstructing a valid aviation facility. The document stated that the board had reviewed the easement, construction history, and commercial arrangements and found them lawful. Vanessa signed last. Then she looked across the room at me. "You've exhausted your options, Mr. Mercer." I closed Dad's notebook and watched the secretary upload the signed resolution to the HOA's official records portal. The timestamp appeared on Allison's screen. Vanessa believed she had converted 4 years of questionable conduct into formal authority. What she had actually done was preserve, in one authenticated document, exactly who knew about the dispute and who chose to keep the planes flying anyway. What Vanessa had actually done was preserve exactly who knew about the dispute and who chose to keep the planes flying anyway. She defended that choice Saturday morning from beneath a white Cedar Ridge tent while aircraft lined the edge of my field. "This resolution confirms our authority," she told residents and prospective buyers. Mr. Mercer's campaign changes nothing. Rain had fallen all night. Water glistened between the runway markers, and the drainage trench near the hangars had turned the color of coffee. I stayed beyond the court-ordered corridor with Allison, filming from my own fence line. The fourth plane touched down too fast. Its wheels hit the wet grass, slid sideways, and dropped into the softened trench. Metal screamed. The left landing gear folded, and the wing carved a brown arc through the field before the aircraft stopped 30 feet from my parked truck. No fire. No serious injuries. But every camera caught Vanessa running toward the pilot while shouting, "This is Mercer's property. His insurance will handle it." Allison looked at me. "Keep recording." By Monday, the pilot's insurer had sent reservation of rights letters to me, Cedar Ridge, and Whitmore Air Park Services. The company demanded the easement, maintenance records, drainage plans, payment agreements, safety notices, and every board communication concerning disputed ownership. My earlier preservation letters were attached. So was Vanessa's signed resolution authorizing continued operations after receiving them. Cedar Ridge's insurance council called an emergency, closed meeting. This time, residents waited outside while independent attorneys entered carrying document boxes. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes late and discovered her key card no longer opened the HOA office. "You cannot lock the president out," she snapped. A board director avoided her eyes. Council ordered the records secured. The server archive reached Allison 2 days later under the court's disclosure order. We already had Dad's notebook, the certified survey, Frank's minutes, Luke's receipts, Melissa's incomplete notary entry, and the hospital records. The emails did not replace those pieces. They connected them. At the renewed hearing, Vanessa's attorney began with the document she believed protected her, the recorded easement. Allison began with the rusted survey cap. The court-appointed survey expert identified Dad's stamped monument and demonstrated how the two transposed coordinate pairs shifted the boundary 38 feet. The runway lights, drainage pipe, and 1,900 feet of landing surface fell back onto Mercer land. Frank authenticated the original board minutes. The approved project was brush clearing and a helicopter emergency area entirely inside Cedar Ridge. Luke authenticated 4 years of payments to Vanessa's private company. Then Allison displayed an email Vanessa had sent Melissa 3 days before the easement was recorded. "Caleb can't come in. Use the signature page from the tax file and finish the acknowledgement. We need this submitted before the family starts asking questions." Vanessa stood so quickly her chair struck the floor. That was taken out of context. Allison placed Dad's hospital chart beside the email. On that date, he could not write normally with his right hand. Vanessa tried one last turn. The board ratified everything. The judge looked at the resolution from Part 7. They ratified continued operations after formal notice of disputed ownership, commercial payments, and safety risk. The courtroom went still. By noon, the easement was declared void. The injunction against me was dissolved. All aircraft operations across my land were prohibited immediately. Then Emily Carver stepped forward with the county's enforcement order. Every hangar and taxiway approval tied to the false easement was suspended. Outside, Cedar Ridge's windsocks still moved above the trees. But for the first time in 4 years, the field beneath it was silent. The county enforcement order was taped across every hangar door before sunset. Red letters. White paper. No ambiguity. Operations suspended. By morning, the solar runway lights had gone dark. The windsock still turned above the cedar wall, but no engines answered it. The silence felt strange at first, like my ears were waiting for something that no longer had permission to come. The settlement took months, but the changes began with machines. Contractors hired by Whitmore Airpark Services pulled the threshold markers, dug out the buried drainage pipe, and broke apart the gravel taxiway connecting my field to the Cedar Ridge hangars. Allison made sure every load was photographed and every damaged section measured before restoration began. Vanessa did not attend. Her company surrendered the documented landing fees and commissions. That money covered my legal bills, the lost hay lease, the ruined tires, and the work required to repair the soil. The HOA paid only the portion its records showed it had authorized, after the new board agreed to independent audits and opened 4 years of financial statements to the residents. People who once stared at me in the hardware store now looked away from Vanessa's photograph on the brokerage window. The state suspended her real estate license after reviewing the emails, false ownership claims, and payments routed through her company. When investigators authenticated the easement and Melissa's notary journal, Vanessa pleaded to filing a fraudulent real estate instrument. She received probation and restitution. Melissa lost her notary commission and cooperated. No dramatic handcuffs. No cheering crowd. Just signatures, canceled licenses, repayment schedules, and doors that no longer opened for her. Roy returned in early spring with the same mower trailer I had watched disappear down my road. He climbed out, studied the repaired western field, and kicked at the new grass covering the old drainage scar. "Ground still packed hard," he said. "It'll come back." He looked toward the hangars. "You sure they're done?" I unlocked the gate myself. "They're done." My insurance carrier reinstated the farm policy after confirming the commercial runway equipment was gone. Roy signed a new hay lease at the farmhouse kitchen table. The first check went straight into the roof fund I had emptied fighting the injunction. By summer, the western field was green again. I kept one agreement from everything Cedar Ridge had claimed the runway was supposed to be. The county received a revocable emergency use license over a shorter stretch of open pasture. No hangar access. No memberships. No private flights. The field could be used only during a declared wildfire, medical evacuation, or disaster response. The land remained mine. That part was written 3 times. At the boundary, a survey crew reset Dad's rusted monument under court supervision. I stood beside them holding the metal cap I had found in the weeds the day Luke's plane nearly ran me down. The surveyor cleaned the dirt from the stamped initials and drove it back into the exact coordinate recorded in Dad's red notebook. Metal struck metal. The sound carried across the field. Later, I framed the notebook and hung it inside the repaired farmhouse. Frank's copies went into the case archive. Luke sent a short letter apologizing for landing on land he had been told the HOA owned. I believed him. He had been sold the same lie as everyone else. The residents elected a new board. They removed the words "Fly-in Community" from every listing and replaced the old Airpark map with the corrected property boundary. Nobody asked me to join. That was fine. One August evening, Roy's mower moved across the former runway, cutting clean rows through the hay. Diesel drifted through the warm air, but there was no aviation fuel, no propeller wash, no white plane dropping over the fence. Beside the gate, the county installed a small emergency access sign bearing Caleb Mercer's name. I rested my hand on Dad's survey cap, while the mower passed safely over the place where strangers had once bought permission to use my land. This time, the only tracks in the field belonged there.